Very good. May I hear from Ms. Landel?
Thank you very much, Madam Chairman. It's a great privilege to be here to speak to you on a matter of grave concern to everyone in Canada, men, women, and children, and the implications not only to Canadians, but also internationally. Canada has ratified 3 UN treaties on drug control, which requires criminalization of the production and distribution of marijuana. Canada has also ratified the UN Declaration on the Rights of the Child, Article 33 of which says children must be protected from illicit drugs and prevented from being used in the production and trafficking of drugs. The Declaration of the Rights of the Child was confirmed and approved by the UN Human Rights Council in Geneva in March 2013. At that time, they specifically referred to the importance of Article 33 to protect children. And the 3 UN drug control conventions were reviewed in April of 2016 at the UN. And this is the first time in 20 years that they were reviewed. And again, the world leaders present at that meeting confirmed and approved it. In addition to this, the UN Narcotics Control Board has meetings held in Vienna every year in which they deal with the review of the drugs. So the drug treaties are very up to date as far as world leaders. They all agree with them. It seems to be almost unanimous with 1 or 2 exceptions. That one was, of course, is Uruguay. But it seems that it's powerfully supported by world leaders. One of the concerns we have is that under the bill C-45, in section 8, 9, what happens is that those who are between 12 and 18 years of age are allowed to possess and to distribute or share 5 grams of marijuana or 10 joints. This is completely in contravention of the UN Declaration on the Rights of the Child. Similarly, the UN Narcotics Control Board in 2017, in its annual report, stated that Canada, Bill C-45, was incompatible with the obligations assumed by Canada under the drug control treaties. Under the terms of the treaties, Canada is supposed to give notice of its withdrawal for 12 months' notice. This has not been done. Also, with regard to Article 41 in the UN Convention on Treaties, that is not, it says it can only be agreed to if the agreement and the modification of a treaty is the object and the purpose of the treaty is not derogated by the agreement. So there is no way out for the fact, one, that Canada is in contravention of the drug treaties plus the UN Declaration on the Rights of the Child, and that there is no escape under the UN Drug Treaties Act or treaty because of the fact you cannot change the objects and purpose of a treaty. And even if 2 countries may try to modify it, it simply has to be a very difficult thing to achieve. In 2013, Uruguay was the first country to regulate marijuana at the national level. Its regulation is considerably more restrictive than that provided in Bill C-45. In Uruguay, the government is the only supplier of marijuana, putting limits on the way it is sold. Only citizens and permanent residents may participate in the marijuana program in Uruguay, and they must register with the government in order to purchase the marijuana. Individuals in Uruguay are restricted to 480 grams, which may be obtained only from licensed pharmacies. The unexpected consequence of Uruguay's marijuana law is that the U.S. government invoked the Patriot Act, which prohibits U.S. banks from handling funds for distributors of marijuana. So international banks, both those with U.S. headquarters such as Citibank and the European banks such as Santander, have prohibited the Uruguayan branches from providing services to the distributors of marijuana. There were initially 13 pharmacies who had agreed to distribute it. Because of the Patriot Act, it has been reduced to 4 pharmacies, and those pharmacies can only deal with marijuana sales by cash. They have no ability to use credit cards, so it has limited the distribution in Uruguay. Because of the Uruguay has now been cut off from the entire financial service market, and every business associated with the newly legal marijuana industry risks being in violation of the U.S. drug laws and would lose access to U.S. banks and dollar transactions. There is little doubt that Canada will also be facing such problems under the Patriot Act. Under President Obama, he overlooked the development of state use of marijuana. But under President Trump, the current administration, he has been very concerned about marijuana use. He has invoked the Patriot Act in Uruguay just 1 month after he assumed the presidency of the U.S., and certainly Canada will be very much in the spotlight. By ignoring treaty obligations, Canada will be setting a very dangerous precedent for other countries to also violate UN treaties. Bill C-45 puts in jeopardy significant other treaties, such as the Non-Proliferation Nuclear Treaties, treaties against war crimes, and the 7 human rights treaties. This creates problems for the world order and international governance. It is not a trivial matter. And again, there is no way out but to follow the terms of the drug treaty. You have to give notice is one choice. The second choice, you can try to use Article 41, but it's a very difficult, and under the treaty agreement, but that's extremely problematical because it does change the objects and purpose of the drug acts. The third choice is to withdraw from the treaty as you can, and then come back in with reservations. But that is a long process. And the United Nations Convention, the Laws of Treaties, which came into effect in 1980, specifically provides in Section 3, Article 54, that the termination of a treaty or the withdrawal of a treaty you may only take place with the consent of the parties after consultation with other contracting states, and this has not occurred. If Canada continues with its intention to pass Bill C-45, despite its many problems both in respect to domestic application and to international law, it must do so in a principled manner, especially as Canada prides itself in being a democratic country that respects and promotes the rule of law. Canada has so far failed to do anything about the treaties in a principled manner. According to the information provided to this committee in March, the Global Affairs says we're going to ignore the treaties. End of the story. They're not going to do anything, they'll ignore it. But this puts at jeopardy the entire international law system, and it puts in jeopardy all sorts of children in Canada, and certainly as a pro-family organization, that is something that troubles us enormously, that 12 to 18-year-olds under Bill C-45 have access to and may share marijuana. It is a very troubling situation, and we would suggest very emphatically that Canada sit back and rethink what it's doing with regard to the substance of the bill, but also internationally, the damage it is creating internationally. There's very limited choices, but Canada, if it wants to do anything as a matter of principle, must follow the proper way and not arbitrarily just say we disregard it. And this is what's been happening. Thanks very much.
Thank you. We have, Ms. Watts, are you just going to answer questions, or do you want to?
We just have one point to make as a
Okay,
women's
thank you.
organization. In 1995, thank you very much. In 1995, at the UN Women's Conference in Beijing, Canada introduced the concept of gender-based analysis. And we're concerned that there really hasn't been a great extent of use of this concept with Bill C-45. And there are very great differences between the responses of male and female to various drugs. For example, the responses to alcohol are different for women. They respond more negatively. Women do respond more negatively. There are differences in the areas of dementia, depression, more for women, less in autism, schizophrenia, Parkinson's, longer recovery for concussions among young women. It has been discovered recently that cannabis reduces the drug circulation to the hippocampus of the brain, which is related to memory and learning, and also related to Alzheimer's. And this study was done at the University of California with 26,000 people participated with a new instrument of measurement, which was not available previously, to envision the circulation of the brain. Now, this concerns us. This particular study did not have a gender-based analysis component, and we're wondering to what extent this component will be applied to Bill C-45.